Hello, everyone. I'm Andrei Kulikov, and thank you for joining today's Energy Club discussion. We'll be talking about the future of Europe's energy market, how to move from crisis management to a smart design. This conversation is a preview of the major Vienna Energy Balancing Forum, which will take place very soon on the 9th of October. And it is really a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce to you one of the key speakers of that forum. He is with us today to help us look into the future of the market. Please welcome Pietro Rabassi, Executive Vice President for Western and Central Europe at Nord Pool. Mr. Rabassi, welcome and thank you for joining our discussion. Your presentation opens with a fascinating timeline of Nord Pool's history. Please walk us through this journey and tell us about Nord Pool's role in the European energy sector today.
Thank you, Mr. Kulikov, for the invitation. I hope you can hear me. Yes?
Yes.
So, welcome everybody as well. Good morning or good afternoon, depending what time zone you are in. I hope this presentation will be useful. We tried to, when we set up this conversation, try to think a little bit big picture about Europe, where we stand, and also, of course, with an interest of a point of view of Ukraine. So if I start sharing my screen, which I hope we can start seeing very soon. Yep. I have three sections here that I would like to cover. The first section is about introducing, for the ones that don't know, what Nord Pool is and how we fit in the energy landscape, Europe specifically. Then the second part is about the challenges that we face in the energy and power landscape, challenges and opportunities. And the third part is about actually the future and how the markets and the energy sector will look like in the next few years, let's say by 2030. So if we tackle the first point, what is Nord Pool? Well, Nord Pool, to make it very short, Nord Pool has been the world's first international power market, which started off in the early 90s, where liberalization and unbundling happened in the Nordics, specifically Norway. And in 1996, the first day-ahead market was created, followed by the first international intraday market in 1999, which you can see on this slide. Things have moved on since then. We have created a pan-European market specifically for electricity called the internal energy market that has been built actually on that model. And we have been integrating actually all the markets across Europe, which is an exciting adventure in the sense that it includes all the European EU member states plus Norway. There are also some countries in the energy community as well, of which Ukraine is part of, that also are looking to be part of this same project and same coupling or same integrated market, however you want to call it. So that we basically, in a nutshell, if there is a possibility and capacity, you can just be active, say, sell electricity in Finland and buy it in Portugal, and vice versa from Norway down to Greece, if possible, in this market. As we know, electricity is driven by electrons, so you need the grid to be available, and as long as that is available, this connection cross-border is actually feasible and possible. And this is a beautiful project as well that shows the beauty of the European integration, the fact that they can rely on your neighbors all the time. You don't have to we have had various drivers, of course, have driven this storm. We had basically various, I would say, 6 to 7 main drivers. We all know about the supply of gas coming from Ukraine that was coming from Russia that was affected by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the fact that many of the European countries are still dependent on gas for industry, for heating, but also for electricity generation, meant that, and since the natural gas coming from Russia could not be substituted very easily and very quickly, it meant a scarcity, right? So that contributed to an increasing price level. But at the same time, you also had, it was the summer, we had higher temperatures than normal. We had also an economic recovery after the pandemic, meaning a higher power and gas consumption. We had also coal power plants being decommissioned and some nuclear ones as well across Europe. We had nuclear power plants out of generation, out of production in France specifically for as well some renovation. We had also a hydrological level which was much lower in the Nordics. So the so-called Nordic or Norwegian battery couldn't work as heavily as normally does, and we didn't have enough renewables or specifically intermittent renewables as we do today. So the situation was actually a perfect scenario for a storm that happened, and as you can see in this map, very clearly with the Russian invasion, the prices starting to rise, and also we had much more volatility, and this price spike is the one that most of us know in August 2022. After that, actually, prices on average have gone down. This graph could continue with price developments. They are not at the same level in terms of, here we're talking about average Europe. They're not at the same level as 2022, but what things have changed is that there is much more volatility in the market in terms of prices. That creates a lot of challenges, and we see that. We see what it means. So why have we talking so much about gas? Well, we all know that actually in normal times, actually the gas was not the one setting the price in the auctions that take place in Europe, because typically in the merit order, gas was not the marginal cost. But then when the price of gas skyrocketed, basically it was the fuel that was setting the price. So higher cost of gas, we can see in this graph, meant also higher cost of electricity, because many of the countries in Europe still rely on a high penetration of gas for the generation of electricity. Looking at the future, here we want to diversify and lower dependence. Of course, gas will also still play an important role, but at the same time, we need to diversify. We need to have other types of base load, meaning nuclear, meaning where it's possible, gas as well. Coal is not very popular, as you know, in Europe. Or if you go for renewables, specifically photovoltaic and wind, so the intermittent ones, you need to have them coupled with batteries. So that's basically volatility generated in the generation can be kind of smoothened. And of course, you can always rely on hydro, so renewables, plus some sort of base load, specifically nuclear, where it's allowed. Another thing which happened as well is that there has been over the years a higher and higher penetration of renewables, specifically intermittent renewables, with high targets at European level. Despite the current discussions and current reviews of the target, actually the penetration of renewables will also continue very likely in Europe. Also for a simple reason, and we'll see it a bit later, that the cost of the renewables is actually lower and much lower than other sources of energy and electricity specifically.
Mr. Rabassi,
Yes.
you were talking about the perfect storm a couple of slides ago. You called 2022 a perfect storm, and your presentation includes a detailed look at the merit order principle. Could you
Yes.
please expand on that analysis for us? What were the key lessons from the crisis, and how did the merit order, where gas often sets the price, influence the situation?
Yep. Thank you for the question. I think it's so there are two parts of the question. How does it work, the marginal cost and the merit order, and what were the kind of lessons learned, I would say, the crisis on this topic. So on the first sub question, I think what is important to mention is that in the way that the markets have been established and from an economic perspective, basically, if you look at this graph that I have pulled up here, you try to be able to match demand. You start using the least and the less costly sources of electricity first, which tend to be renewables, the so-called levelized cost of electricity, but also in terms of marginal cost, how much it costs to produce that specific quantity of electricity. Typically, renewables are the lower cost, photovoltaic, wind, hydro. And then you have other types of conventionals, nuclear, lignite, coal, and gas as well. Gas played a major role because still the European generation of electricity, not only gas consumption per se for other uses, but also the electricity generation is very high in specific countries where actually there is a high percentage of electricity coming from gas-fired power plants. So that means that to be able to meet, if you look at this graph, for instance, it's just an example. If you need to generate a specific amount of electricity, you consume the less expensive sources first until you get to the point where actually you need to meet that demand. And then if you're only left with gas, actually gas in that specific price area, this is just an example, it's not, let's remember that the prices are set in price zones in Europe, so this is not one European price, but if it is one specific price zone, which has a high also penetration of gas, basically you're left with gas, and since gas had a high price, it drove also the price of electricity very high. What the lessons learned have been is that, as it has been mentioned many times, also by regulators, by market participants, is that the market is there to give the price signals. So you don't have to shoot the messengers. The market are there to really reflect reality. So you should not have measures that distort the price signal, because you want to have a market which shows reality. Now, it's like, let me just give you this analogy. If you have a back pain and you want to solve it, okay, you can take pills, but it doesn't solve the issue. So if you really want to solve the issue, you have to go and get some, do some exercises, do some physiotherapy, for instance. It's like in this case, if you introduce measures in the market to distort the price signal in the price formation, you're not solving the issue. The issue is actually that the generation mix, if it relies on a source of energy which has a higher marginal cost, it will always impact the price formation, and the prices will be higher. So then actually you can implement measures ex post to mitigate the effects on the consumers of that higher price. You can actually try and change the mix of electricity. You can try and find lower costs of generation. So the lesson learned is that the market needs to be there and needs to be free to generate the right price signal, not be distorted. Have I answered your question? Looks like. Okay. Now, if we go to the following section, what are the challenges and opportunities? First of all, what problem are we trying to solve? Here I pulled up, I've always loved the mathematics, although I haven't worked as a mathematician, but I pulled up this formula. Why, in your view? Well, because it is a formula with three variables, which we are trying to maximize in Europe. We have the trilemma, so-called trilemma, where we are actually trying to have a system which is at the same time affordable, sustainable or decarbonized, and secure. These variables, and this is more and more important in a world which is increasingly electrified, because we have more electricity generation coming from AI, artificial intelligence, data centers in general. We have more renewables in the mix. So given the energy transition, we have more electric vehicles, so decentralized also consumption and generation. We have, I mentioned electric vehicles, we have batteries. So basically all sources that were previously fueled by fossil fuels are now electrified, and this drives up the need for electricity. There is an IEA, International Energy Agency, estimate that by 2050, to be able to meet the demand of electricity, we need versus 2020, we need about 5 to 6 times the installed capacity of electricity globally. So it's a massive change, of course, and that system needs to be, first of all, secure. We have it here. So you have to have the economic system that runs and the society which is powered. It's like basic. It needs to be for economic as well benefit. It needs to be affordable to consumers, both residential and industrial. And the third point, it needs to be sustainable or decarbonized, because of course we have the impacts of climate change. And these variables, the parameters of these variables, of the relative weight, changes according to time and according to also policy priorities. Now, this is the European level. We also know that in Europe, energy is not an exclusive competence at the European level. So you have countries with different priorities within that framework that we talked about, this trilemma, different priorities, different laws that need to be harmonized. But once again, we have national priorities, national specificities. So there is a lot of discrepancy and a lot of diverse implementations, whose harmonization can benefit actually the industry. In this context, what are the challenges? Mr. Kulikov, I'm trying to speak. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, Mr. Rabassi, about this fascinating concept of energy trilemma, security and decarbonization. You have shown a very insightful breakdown of different national priorities across Europe. But from your perspective, where does Ukraine stand in this trilemma today? And what should be our main priority?
Let me be very direct here. I think that out of these three, and this is the reason why I mentioned it also as the first one, clearly Ukraine is priority is and needs to be security. In the current situation, there are some developments as well that you know better than I do in some of your plants and nuclear power plants that are difficult. So security of supply and making sure that the system is up and running, and try and diversify as well as much as you can dependence. I think should be your primary goal currently, primary focus. And of course, also has to be affordable, and as much as you can, also make it sustainable. But I would say that for a system to work first, you need to have secured electricity, the starting point. Okay, so what are the challenges? Well, and let me try to link them to one of the 3 points of the trilemma. So, challenges. This is a collection of various points. This is the kind of the dark side, and we'll have an improvement part, which is brighter. So, if you look at I would say the more depressing part, we are not meeting the 1.5 degrees target we set in with the Paris Agreement. It's challenging. We will see that Europe is meeting it. At least is in the right track for that, but not the rest of the world. Second point, related to security of supply, the systems that we have in place in Europe and specific countries here. I pointed out the example of Germany, is that we have intermittent renewables that by definition are intermittent, so they generate a lot of volatility in terms of generation. And so the system struggles to cope with that and ensure a secure system that is up and running all the time. So the challenge here, in a sense, is to be able to find a way to flatten those curves and have more batteries together with intermittent renewables and or more base load, be it nuclear and or gas. Well, coal is also an option, but of course it's not good for the sustainable target, so it is not really very fashionable in Europe specifically. We have another challenge, which is the fact that gas, yes, is more and more in the mix. It has come back also with the recent positions of the German government, which has realized that you still need a base load, and so gas can ensure security, but also be a transition fuel still for the energy transition and move into a more decarbonized world. And then this is the challenge that we have that I was mentioning of having intermittent renewables not backed with enough batteries, where the design has not been well thought, And it's not an official version, but rumors say that, of course, the intermittent renewables and specifically photovoltaic played an important role in the blackout that happened in Spain last April. So another challenge for the security of the system. We are talking about Europe, but coal and specifically the sustainable aspect of things has a global impact. So even if Europe doesn't use coal as much, Europe, as you can see, North America and the rest of the world have decreased their use of coal. The rest of the world, meaning Asia Pacific and specifically China, has increased the amount of coal used. So actually, there is also a challenge here on the sustainability goal, the fact that there is one area of the world which still uses a lot of coal, which is not good for the sustainability goal. We have another challenge in Europe, which is the fact that this is Europe specific, that our prices on average, and we can find more detailed graphs, but on average, the power prices are higher than the rest of the world, and same goes for gas. For gas, even higher. We have here kind of the average set at basically 345% higher in EU versus US, and about 150% versus China and the US, meaning that the consumers in Europe, specifically industrial consumers, have been put at high risk or kind of vulnerability in terms of economic attractiveness on a global landscape. So we need to tackle this, and this is why it's when I saw that the European Commission came out with a new deal called the Clean Industrial Deal. Well, industrial has been part of a specific policy at the European level. I was personally very happy because it was part of discussions first and earlier, but it was never part officially of a plan by the European Commission to focus finally on the economic aspect of the energy transition as well. Yes, and I mentioned this. Lower prices, or sometimes high, we still have them, and there is a lot of volatility in the market. This is just an example of Nordic and Baltic prices, but in Europe, we have the rest of the European countries a similar pattern. Nevertheless,
Mr. Rabassi, just a moment. Speaking of the challenges, you highlight some critical cases. For instance, Germany's struggle with intermittent renewables, the blackout in Spain due to a lack of system inertia. How relevant are these problems for Ukraine? Because we're planning a large-scale reconstruction based on the so-called green generation.
I think the lessons learned would apply as well in Ukraine. And then the positive thing is that there are some countries that have implemented renewables, and specifically intermittent renewables, like wind photovoltaic, like Germany, Spain, not too far away, Italy as well, some other countries. So you can really use the lessons learned, and I think you should definitely try and work together with the stakeholders in the various European countries that have done that, to see basically how to do it. And the key challenge here is to be able to have sort of flexibility tools, let's call it that way, that allow for the system with a high penetration of renewables, intermittent renewables, to be balanced and have the effects of the intermittent renewables be mitigated. For instance, with the use of large-scale batteries, which has not been the case very heavily in the past years, but now there's a high focus as well in many of the European countries, because intermittent renewables need to be coupled with those batteries to simulate, if you like, a sort of base load type of generation. So this typically is a lesson learned which you can apply, and there are many more, of course, that you can think of when introducing more and more renewables in the system in Ukraine. I hope I have answered. So if not, please correct me or jump in. Now, right. Challenges. Nevertheless, what are the good developments? Well, we see that exactly because of the help of batteries, the famous so-called duck curves, meaning you can see basically on a daily basis, typically the shape, either this graph or this graph. This is California, but the same applies to some European countries with the high penetration of renewables and solar specific. You can see that there is basically in terms of load, you can see that there are some peak moments during the day, and the fact that you have more batteries, you can see in the system coupled with the renewables, you see that those duck curves have been flattening over the years. So we go from a, let's take this one, we go from a deeper belly, if you want, to less deep, and then in 2025 there likely will be even less deep. So more flattening, meaning, and that goes hand in hand with the fact that the price of batteries has gone down as well. That means that installing a battery has become less expensive because of economy of scale, so they can be coupled also more easily, also the size, but also the costs more easily and less costly. Intermittent renewables and hydro are the sources with the lowest cost of electricity. You can see here the levelized cost. Onshore wind, hydropower, photovoltaic, offshore wind are the ones, the cheapest ones. If you look at the developments, this is kind of estimated in 2030. So it means that actually investing in renewables contributes as well to the affordability argument. Of course, as long as the price of the wholesale market generation impacts the retail price. We know that in some of the countries there is a high correlation, in other ones not a high correlation, because there are other components in the final bill, like taxes, levies, and tariffs of any sort. But anyway, this is a good news. We also know that not only Europe, but actually also the rest of the world, specifically China, there is a high investment of renewables, photovoltaic specifically. And this, once again, because the renewables are less costly, plays in favor of the affordability argument, and also the sustainability one, because it contributes to the reduction of the CO2 emissions. And you can see here the installed capacity that is actually championed by China by far, almost 900 gigs, and Germany about 100 is the first European country. And nuclear as well, where it's possible as well, contributes definitely to the security and also the sustainability argument from a CO2-free point of view. We are in Europe pretty far when it comes to the energy transition. So going back to the affordability goal and sustainability, we are there. Because if you see the graph on the left and on the right hand side, you can see that renewables generate about 50%, and nuclear 22%. So we are over 70% of generation, more than 2/3 coming out of clean energy, so CO2 free, which is a big development if you think of it, and specifically if you look at a few years ago. So this is on a good track, and also the CO2 emissions are on a good track. This goes to sustainability argument in Europe. So this is where we are in terms of scenario currently. Yeah, before we...
Mr. Rabassi, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also quite a lot of positive news. You show a compelling example from California, where battery storage is helping to what they call flatten the duck curve, and you also illustrate the dramatic drop in renewable energy costs. How significant do you see the potential of BESS for stabilizing the market in Europe and particularly in Ukraine?
Yeah, so I think that there are two points in the answer. So first of all, overall, I think BESS, so batteries, battery storage, are definitely going to be a key component to enable the energy transition, but not only to enable electrification in general, because we know that, first of all, electricity cannot be stored, as we know, but so batteries in large scale contribute to that specific challenge, but also with having more and more intermittent renewables in the mix, you need flexibility tools such as batteries that are, by the way, as I showed earlier, less costly today here in this graph, to be able to mitigate the effect of the intermittent renewables. So definitely we see that happening in California, as mentioned, in Europe, but also in Ukraine. It will be key that you also couple the renewables, photovoltaic and solar and wind, for instance, together with batteries to ensure a high level of security of supply in the system. I hope I've been exhaustive enough. If not, let me know. Now,
very eloquent.
Good.
And persuasive.
Great. Thank you. So we talked about challenges, good developments, and now so far. Now, how will the future look like? And what is the sector, the power market specifically, will look like to accommodate for the trilemma, which you mentioned, the three aspects, and an increasing share of intermittent renewables. So first of all, I mentioned this at the beginning when we talked about, you asked the question about the market design, what have been the lessons learned. Well, first of all, the market also will need to stay as it is today in terms of not having interferences in the price signal, because it is the best way to show that the system is not perfect, where the issues are and where you need to invest, what type of investments you need to do. So with a free price formation, you can have that signal, which is good for investment purposes, grid planning, and also generation planning. The marginal pricing indeed is the system that makes sure that the cheapest sources of energy are used first. And and also, as I mentioned, also we give the right investment signals. So the market is as it is, but also in the light of the energy reform that we had of the electricity markets in Europe, the so-called EMD, Electricity Market Design Reform, which materialized in the new regulation, which came into being last year, the so-called electricity regulation, amongst other things, foresees the role of the market, enhanced role by having also an important role played by the forward markets, long-term markets for hedging, and also the role of PPAs and CfDs as complementary tools to be able to ensure that we meet the targets of that trilemma. Of course, when prices go down, the PPAs possibly become less relevant, but still there is a big use in there and big role that they can play. I mentioned the Clean Industrial Deal, very important tool, very important policy that came into being earlier this year, and also which tackles the affordability aspect, very important one. And this is also going to have an impact in the timeline of this European Commission until 2030. So combine energy transition and decarbonization together with a strong focus on affordability. And of course, as a basis of all this needs to be also security argument. If you look specifically at the markets themselves, how they will also evolve, we will be having more and more trading and activity close to delivery of electricity. That's because the renewables have their forecasts, which become more reliable the more you move closer to delivery. We have more and more use of AI, artificial intelligence, APIs, algos in the markets as well, simply because they're becoming more and more complex and humans cannot cope with that complexity. Cost cutting also is an important aspect. So basically, it's the cost sensitivity of the players. Since renewables drive down prices, if you want to keep margins stable, if you're a player in the industry, you need to drive down costs and be always attentive to costs. So this cost consciousness is going to be an integrated part of the future electricity market. Then we have more and more decentralized generation and consumption, and hence decentralized markets as well, so-called flexibility markets, but in general, it's flexibility tools to be able to match the mismatches between generation and consumption at also lower level of grid voltage, which is distribution level. Smart pricing, meaning variable pricing or fixed pricing, has been also part of the discussions in Europe to shield consumers from higher energy prices. Of course, when things normalize, there will be a tendency to go back to variable pricing in terms of schemes, and this has an impact as well on the wholesale markets. And also we have more and more different types of players, and we need to accommodate those players in the industry as a market operator. I was speaking about flexibility markets, and you can see here that basically in the system that we have had so far, traditionally the markets have been at transmission level, but we need also markets that are more of a distribution level. The two needs to be linked more and more. And just to conclude, I think that we have basically going forward, we have many things that we need to look at. For instance, I was mentioning flexibility. So demand side flexibility needs to be there. We need to have liquid financial markets for hedging purposes, together with PPAs and CfDs as well. We need to invest in grid capacity and interconnectors to be able to connect the various distributed generation and consumption. We need also to use another source of energy, which is energy efficiency, even more to optimize it. Flexibility tools, I put them together with the flexibility markets in the flexibility tools together with site flexibility, storage solutions. You mentioned BESS, it's part of this. But at the same time, also sufficient base loads to be able to ensure security of supply. The continuous markets as well to be able to adapt forecasts. And also reserve markets at balancing level with grid operators, and some capacity markets that remunerate capacity installed where that is needed. There is a different concept across, as you know, various European countries. But basically, these elements are very important to be able to achieve this trilemma, the maximization of this trilemma, this function, affordability, sustainability, and security, knowing that the weight of these variables changes over time, and is the case in Ukraine as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rabassi. It's been a pleasure and privilege to listen to you, let alone ask questions. And using this opportunity, I still want to ask you something to extrapolate on the very important messages that you've sent in this presentation. Moving on to the future, you say in the presentation that Nord Pool supports the principle of marginal pricing. Could you elaborate on why this principle is considered the best? And what role do you see for alternatives like PPAs and CfDs in attracting new investment?
Yes, marginal pricing is the best way because it ensures that the least costly sources of energy are used first. So you exhaust basically in your mix first the sources which are cheapest, and hopefully if you don't have to resort to the higher cost ones, you can also have low prices in the end. There will be instances, of course, where this is not the case. Instances where actually the prices are even very low because you can just rely on renewables which have low costs. Yes, the alternative dimensions, CfDs, PPAs are just complementary tools to the market to make sure that the investment price signals which are generated by the market give the right investment signals, and where basically investments need to be done. Private operators can use PPAs to make sure that they have a certain guaranteed revenue in the future. They can always use also financial markets to hedge their positions. Also, CfDs have an important role of the state as well. So they are, in my view, all complementary measures to the market. And of course, they become more and more relevant depending on how high or low the price in the market is.
Thank you. Speaking further about the markets, your vision for the future market design is particularly interesting, especially the introduction of a new local level and flexibility markets. Could you explain what this means in practice? Does it imply that smaller players, like individual businesses, will be able to sell flexibility directly to the system operator?
Sorry. Thanks for the question. Indeed, there is not kind of one solution in the market yet. It needs to be harmonization of rules and so on and so forth. But the flexibility concept and flexibility markets are exactly thought for that, in the sense that local decentralized generation can play an important role, and needs to be, that its potential needs to be unlocked. Now, if myself as a rooftop owner of a solar rooftop, I can participate or not, depends on the scale, of course. But the idea is that also the small consumers can be part, if aggregated. They can be aggregated into a player, for instance, that gives that service. They should be part of these markets that offer that flexibility to the grid operators, in this case at distribution level, so that the congestions are solved at distribution level before they kind of come to the transmission level. And it's key, this connection which we have here on this slide between traditional markets and distributed markets is going to be key.
Thank you very much. And if I am not imposing, I still have a question. The final question. In conclusion, you outlined a number of things that the market needs more of, from flexibility and storage to interconnectors. If you could give one, the most important piece of advice to Ukraine as it integrates into the European market, what should be our top priority from that list?
Yes, I think it's basically all the tools that you have here with that can ensure security of supply. That should be your first goal as we speak, and then also, of course, while doing that, you can also invest in technologies, invest in power plants, generation systems, and larger in the energy sector, with solutions that guarantee at the same time sustainability and affordability. But security has to be the primary focus, accompanied by these two, and these tools here really can facilitate that. All of them, actually. But once again, I think the key here is to ensure security and, whenever possible, accompanied by affordability and sustainability.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rabassi. In your advice and your evaluation, we find not only the encouragement, but also some way to move forward. And I certainly look forward to hearing you once again on the 9th of October at that Balancing Energy Forum in Vienna. Thank you very much, and all the best to you and Nord Pool.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I hope it's been useful. I wish you a very nice day. Thank you.